Bowe Bergdahl, what a mystery. What started out as a lovely rose garden portrait with the president and Bowe's parents has turned into a confusing mess that, if you believe the detractors, haters, and conspiracy theorists, has the ability to eclipse both the VA scandal and Benghazi. That would be a miracle of incompetence on the part of the administration and, in the short term, could impact this fall's election. In the shorter term, it's become a national pastime trying to distinguish fact from resentment, as it gets pretty alluring to play pin the tail on the liar. When did we first know Bergdahl's whereabouts? And if there was a deal to be had, why didn't the president flex his tough rhetoric years ago when a swap could have been made at a better price? Did Bergdahl help the Taliban? And how do you ditch the army without being taken prisoner or getting people killed? It's on. It's here. This is The Independent. Yes, indeed. An interesting Tuesday night. Welcome to it. I'm Kennedy, live in the Fox Business Network studios, along with Reason Magazine editor-in-chief Matt Welch and Camille Foster from Free Think Media. Together, we're very curious, and we are The Independents. Bowe Bergdahl is being held tighter than a 2-year-old's whoopee. He's being reintegrated with the help of some concerned and well-armed military officials who are trying to get the hapless hermit to find his memory. Bergdahl's former platoon mates are coming out of the woodwork to collectively tear up their alleged NDAs and paint a picture of a guy lost lives when he drifted away. And yet again, there are more questions in the mountains. Let's put it to the party panel. We've got a few experts. Lea Gabrielle is a Fox News correspondent for Shepard Smith Reporting. She's also a former Navy fighter pilot and intelligence operations officer. And comedian Tom Shillue, he likes cola and ponies. Welcome to both of you. Indeed. So, Lea, you have certainly served your country well, and I'm sure you knew a bunch of people who were idealists. Did you ever run into anyone like Bowe Bergdahl, someone who just grew sick of the job and wanted to get away?
You know, fortunately, I didn't, because I think it would have been pretty upsetting to find someone who is saying things that he allegedly said in his emails, according to Rolling Stone. But I didn't run into anyone like that. But you do hear about people, you know, sort of going native when they're in country. And I do know people who became very close to the Afghan people that they were working with and who kind of tended to drift in that direction while they were there.
And he's already in that direction to begin with. So my question, I think, for someone like that, because the most egregious thing is the people who were killed who went out looking for him. I mean, that is really unforgivable. Is there a way he could have gotten out of the Army if he did grow so disillusioned? What do you do if you're fed up?
Well, I think that's something that really would be a chain of command issue. The chain of command, you know, the leadership within your organization should be keeping an eye on you and your mental state and kind of paying attention to these types of things that you may be saying. So if it's true that his fellow soldiers knew that he had become disillusioned, that's certainly something that should have been looked at within his chain of command. But you don't know how quickly it may have happened. I mean, It may have happened very quickly, and he may have, made a decision that's had a lot of impact. You know, and going back to those soldiers, as far as people who, may have been killed, we're still waiting to hear from the Pentagon on that as to whether or not that's true.
All right. Well, long before they found Bowe Bergdahl and made the prisoner swap, there have been rumors, there has been conjecture, there have been all sorts of wild stories. What are some of the things that you're hearing today, Matt?
The big news that came out today was Evan Buteau, and I'm sure I'm mangling his name, his interview with Jake Tapper over at CNN, former mate of Bergdahl's, who says that after he was captured, then suddenly the attacks by the Taliban on their unit started attaining a level of precision they'd never seen before, very strongly intimating that he thought that he was either collaborating with the Taliban or giving him information. We don't know if any of this is true. It's totally not determinable ultimately, and we should be cognizant that this is a lot of fog of war going on, and who knows how many kind of rationales or agendas are being played out there. But it's significant that the people that he served with have been ripping up their non-disclosure agreements serially and are basically accusing him of not just being a deserter, but potentially working with or aiding the other side, which also suggests something potentially interesting with the administration's ideas about going after him. Maybe they went after him because they wanted him to stop doing all of that. Point is, we don't really know what happened. We're not going to know what happened, but it still looks really, really strange.
I mean, it sounds like, Camille, it actually reminds me of the John Krakauer book, Into the Wild. You know, a younger guy who's trying to find himself and goes to extremes to help people. He thought that the Army was his ticket to do that. And, if he just drifts away and is maybe kidnapped, that's one thing. It is forgivable. But if he's is actually helping the Taliban.
Right.
Holy crap.
But we have no idea whether or not that's the case. Quite frankly, it actually sounds like the guy had actually tried to get away and had gotten into a pretty nasty fight with his captors and then was taken back again. Furthermore, it is materially important, at least, and interesting that his fellow soldiers are turned on him in a number of instances. But I'm not sure it's at all surprising. The notion that a guy who walks away is then sort of chastised isn't surprising at all. What I do think is important, though, and I'm a little aggravated that so much of the attention is on the story, and it's obviously it's peculiar and strange and interesting, so it should generate some interest for that reason.
And there are so many different aspects to it.
There are so many different aspects.
It's not just there are the unanswerable questions with Bergdahl, it's what surrounds
But we were having some interesting conversations before this story hit, and I don't know that the president doesn't win by getting rid of the VA scandal and inheriting instead something so complicated and convoluted.
Yeah.
We're not talking, for example, about the fact that Afghanistan is a place that is kind of a mess and that the president plans to leave 10,000 odd troops there and a year later leave somewhere around 2,000 odd troops. What on earth is it that we actually plan to obtain in Afghanistan that we hadn't gained in the last decade with tens of thousands of troops?
Yeah.
Prosecutorial discretion here, that is an outrage to me. And the fact that the conservatives aren't upset about that at all, in fact, many of them are saying they want to stay longer, that is an outrage to me. This situation is very confusing. There are more questions than there are answers. That, on the other hand, is quite clear.
But it also speaks to the incompetence, the arrogance, the illegality of the way the administration is acting. And Tom Shillue, I want to ask you, is this the administration just trying to get rid of the VA scandal? And if so, have they created an even bigger problem for them?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I can't imagine.
Am I a cynic?
You are cynical, but maybe this thing is kind of like the opposite of the TV show Homeland, isn't it? It's like maybe this guy was a jerk when he left, and now he's not a jerk anymore. You know what I'm saying? But I thought that in your intro, you had the most interesting and kind description of desertion. You called it, maybe his wanderlust got the best of him. I've never heard it put that way when someone deserts the military.
Yeah, but you think without question that's it. You don't think the guy was nervous from the service, maybe he had some mental problems. You think that he was a bad person who left his command and left people to die who went and looked for him.
That's the only, if there's anything he did wrong, that's what he did wrong. First of all, if he was writing letters home to his dad saying that he hated America, that's legal. You can do that. Yeah. Maybe he hated America. So that's
and maybe not the first person in the Army to do that.
Exactly. When you're in the Army, especially when you're in the war, you tend to be, a little bit irritated with the situation. So that's okay, right? And if he helped the Taliban with their gardening, that's not illegal either. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing that he did wrong, obviously, was if he walked away. That's not good.
There is an avenue for that. If you are fed up, and
that's my question.
I've met a ton of people who were fed up with serving the military, became profoundly disillusioned, became Ron Paul supporters, and for very good reason. They go out there, they see this policy that just doesn't work.
Klinger wore a dress all those years. You remember? To get out of Korea, he wore the dress.
Exactly.
He was so competent and wonderful.
You can arrange for a discharge, a dishonorable discharge. If you're going to go wander through the mountains in the direction of China, in the middle of that area, bad things are going to happen to you.
He obviously made a serious mistake, and it cost the lives of his fellow soldiers approximately. Yeah. The primary cause, however, is bad policy that has them there in the first place and may, in fact, have them there for another 2 years or more. And that, to me, again, like I said, there are so many questions. That is the real outrage.
Okay, but what do you say to the family members who lost those 6 or 7 soldiers who were killed looking for Bowe Bergdahl? What do you say to that?
Well, obviously, if that's true, then they have a huge beef with this guy and what he did. But what about my little Homeland scenario? What if the administration is not being dumb here? Maybe they're being wily. Maybe they brought him back not to be nice to him, but because he has information. Maybe they do have information that he was helping the Taliban. Now they're going to get him back here and debrief him.
I suspect they'd play this differently if that was the case.
Maybe they're playing dumb.
I will say this. I served as an intelligence officer in Afghanistan, and so I do happen to know a lot about how the intelligence community works. And there is absolutely intelligence to be gained from debriefing him. Right now, while they're taking care of his medical attention, I promise you, they are debriefing him from an intelligence perspective. Not just that, but the exchange itself. I can guarantee you we had eyes in the sky. So that was an intelligence gathering operation as well. That being said, to give up these 5 guys, these 5 Taliban bad guys, that's the real question that I have right now is it all worth it? Because people that I know who served in the CIA in Afghanistan when I was there, they're pretty upset right now.
I mean, what about the story that it could have been 2 Taliban-y a few years ago, and now all of a sudden it's 5? Is it because they're just trying to empty out Gitmo? Couldn't they have shaken off a few Uyghurs?
That's a really good question. I mean, President Obama said that he wanted to close down Gitmo. He said that he was going to. So what's going to happen next? I don't know. But what I do know is that these are 5 high-level bad guys in the Taliban, and there's a real question as to what decision was made, why this decision was made to make this trade.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that actually at the end of the show. Matt and Camille and I are going to go over that very specific question. Did the president break the law? You're going to want to stick around for that. We're also going to tackle minimum wage with our panel a little later on. And from one crazy story to the next, how did a toddler get so badly burned he had to be put into a coma during a drug raid? He's going to need surgery. Law enforcement watchdog Radley Balko makes his independence debut next. Stay with us. Let's turn to the other war. As the drug war continues to needlessly stack up casualties, there's a disturbing image coming up, so please beware and take note. A recent drug raid in Habersham County, Georgia went horribly wrong, and instead of nabbing notorious dope dealers, cops used a distraction device and burned a 19-month-old toddler named Bowe. I know, look at that poor baby. Undercover cops who bought drugs the week before said they didn't see any evidence of kids, but they were sadly proven wrong, and now little Bowe is still in a medically induced coma. He's breathing with one lung and needs surgery. So how did this happen? And how badly did this department screw up the raid? Radley Balko joins us. He's the author of Rise of the Warrior Cop. You got to get his book. And he keeps tabs on stories just like this. Welcome, Radley.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Radley, welcome to the Independence. What happened in Georgia?
Well, this was a very standard drug raid. An informant, a confidential informant, bought $50 worth of meth off of this guy, apparently at this house. And at 3 a.m. the next morning, just hours later, they conducted this very violent, very volatile raid that included the detonation of a flashbang grenade. Now, these are, these flashbang grenades, these are devices that are intended to injure people. That's the point of using them. It's a very bright flash of light that in lots of cases has set houses and cribs and couches on fire, and a very loud sort of pulsating sound. The idea is to stun someone and disorient them so that the police can get in and clear the room. The problem is they typically detonate these devices on the other sides of doors or windows without really looking to see where they're detonating them. And this, Bowe is not the first casualty of these devices, and I'm sure he won't be the last.
No, but his pack and play was right up against the door. So did the device just go in his little sleeping area?
Yeah, it caught the playpen on fire and burned him. But, this isn't the first example. Ayanna Jones, the little girl in Detroit a few years ago, was actually set on fire herself when a flashbang grenade was tossed on the couch where she was sleeping. I've documented several cases where people have died from these devices, not just from burns, but from heart attacks when police raid the wrong house. Again, this is a device that's intended to injure people, and it's being deployed against people who are still suspected of nonviolent consensual crimes. These are people who haven't even been charged or convicted. These devices are being deployed in the course of investigating a crime, not even charging someone. So, I think it's... there's a defense attorney in Texas, Clay Conrad, who's actually argued that this is unconstitutional, that this is imposing a punishment on people before they've been convicted. And there was an amusing case where he made this argument, and the prosecutor said that this was ridiculous. And Conrad said, well, if these devices are harmless, let me detonate one in the courtroom here in the jury box. And of course, the prosecutor very quickly settled the case.
Radley, one of the many, many disturbing things about this case is that the drug raid was executed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is there no sense anywhere that a 3 a.m. violent drug raid might lead to adverse consequences?
Yeah, I mean, I've been harping on this issue for so long now, I feel like a broken record sometimes. But yeah, I mean, this is this is a $50 meth buy. That's what instigated this raid. You could catch this guy as he's coming or going. Matter of fact, he didn't even live at this house. He'd been thrown out of the house. They actually ended up arresting him at a different residence a few hours later. So he wasn't even home when the raid happened, and this wasn't his home to begin with. But you could arrest this guy. You could arrest him at a traffic stop, at a stop sign, right? The idea that every low-level drug crime merits barreling into some house with a battering ram and guns blazing and setting off grenades it's taking the drug war metaphor and making it very literal. It's been going on for a long, long time.
I mean, they already had a no-knock warrant. They could have gone in the house and used the battering ram or something else so they didn't harm people on the other side. It's just, I don't know. The whole thing, it's kind of cheesy. And what has the department said about it? I mean, it sounds like they're not very apologetic. What are you hearing?
No, they're not. I mean, they've asked for prayers for the police officers because they're all very apparently shattered by this. The sheriff at one point said that the drug dealer, the guy who sold $50 worth of meth, $50 worth of meth, is the real terrorist here. You actually called him a domestic terrorist several times. Now, think about that guy. This guy sold $50 to somebody who he thought wanted to buy $50 of meth, right? It was a consensual transaction, whether or not it was legal. Police broke into someone's home with a battering ram, with guns, and set off a flashbang grenade that burned a baby and put the baby in intensive care. Now, I would not argue that the police were terrorists. I think they were doing what they thought was the right thing, as twisted as it was. But the idea that they're going to then transfer that onto this suspect who sold $50 worth of meth is really sort of the height of drug war absurdity. By the way, one of the prosecutors in the case is actually entertaining the idea of charging the alleged drug dealer for the injuries that the police inflicted on the baby. So try to process that.
All right. Well, Radley, there is a lot of insanity in the world, and we hope you come back and visit us soon.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Very good. All right. The EPA is putting on a regulation dog and pony show, but who's going to take home the big blue ribbon? And more importantly, who's going to profit off a new set of carbon spewing rules? Find out next. Welcome back to the Independence. Very classy show. New EPA rules will cause problems in coal-producing states that not only produce carbon emissions, they produce votes as well. The White House says it's putting a stop to big business polluting, but at the same time, big business is on board with a slew of new measures that could both cut into profits, cost jobs, and make the planet dirtier. Tim Carney gets down and dirty as the senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you for having me back.
I'm so happy you're here. So tell me, can Obama have it both ways when it comes to business and the environment?
Oh, yeah, and he does this on every policy, where he simultaneously pretends to be the scourge of big business, and he paints his opponents as the shills for corporate America, and then he says, my policies are so reasonable that I even have business on my side. And with his EPA rules, he has a lot of businesses against him, but he has a lot of the solar industry and a lot of manufacturers on his side who see lots of profit in the rules.
So we got a little crony-capitalism going on here. I'm guessing we have some Democratic donors who will profit from these new regulations?
Well, yeah, there's a group called America's Energy Alliance, or it's Advanced Energy. I even forget the name of the group. But
I'll tell you, it's Advanced Energy Economy.
Advanced Energy Economy, yes. And their top lobbyist is a man named Milton Wolf. He is a big Obama donor, and he's out there pushing for these EPA rules. And again, the groups he's lobbying for include a company owned by Warren Buffett that does manufacturing and sees in the push towards energy efficiency, they'll get subsidized. I love energy efficiency. I love companies that make things more energy efficient. I just don't know that subsidizing them is necessarily a good thing for us to be doing.
Tim, we've seen ethanol being one of the single worst policies in the history of the United States of America. It's a mandate and trying to make the world a better place, etc. It exists even though every single rational person says it's a terrible thing to exist. Yep. What are the new ethanols or the potential new ethanols in this new EPA extravaganza?
So here's the thing. When we limit the use of coal in the United States, which is what this rule does, it drives the coal industry, the people mining the coal here, to export their coal more. It makes the world price of coal lower. So you have foreign power plants, people building them say, well, you know what, it's now more profitable to build a coal-fired power plant. So then all of a sudden they're burning the coal in Africa and South America and Asia. I'm glad they're getting coal, but you know what, if you're caring about the atmosphere, about emissions, about pollution, their plants are not going to be as clean as our plants. So pushing the coal burning, making it cheaper to build coal-fired power plants in South America could end up worsening some of the emissions that are going on here.
Well, Tim, it's interesting. I wonder what policy, how we get at good policy. It doesn't seem like most people care about this a great deal. And the reason I say that is because at least when you cast sort of coal versus solar, most people think, well, solar is the good guy. Like, those are the good guys. That's what we want, right? How do we get to good policy, especially in a world where most people don't seem to understand what's going on?
Well, I think that one of the problems is when we're looking for advanced alternative energies, the politicians can't help but pick winners and losers. And if they just went ahead and they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get out of this. There are oil subsidies. Let's kill those. There are coal subsidies. Let's kill those. If there's anything we're doing to subsidize natural gas, let's make sure that we're not subsidizing the bad emissions, not subsidizing pollution. And in fact, ethanol is one of those subsidies for pollution. An EPA study found that the ethanol mandate that we're currently operating under actually increases greenhouse gas emissions. And so if the EPA were to dial it back, which to the Obama administration's credit, they're talking about doing it, the EPA dials back that mandate, it's actually helping the environment while getting rid of this wasteful corporate welfare.
And that's exactly what it is. It's so disingenuous because when you have these major energy companies, they're not just producing coal in the United States. Like you said, they've got operations all over the world and countries where, you know, it's cheap and easy, where labor is especially cheap. That's where they're going to do the polluting, and that's why it looks like these big businesses are going green. They're not. It's totally out of convenience in this country, and it is the worst form of corporate welfare.
And some of the same companies historically that have pushed for greenhouse gas caps here in the U.S. have simultaneously been building the coal-fired power plants overseas. You may remember an energy company called Enron. They lobbied for us to put those caps on while building coal-fired plants over there. There was an energy company, AES, that was part of a big pro-cap-and-trade lobby here in the U.S., but not overseas, where they were building more coal-fired plants. So these guys see cheaper coal in the developing world. If we outlaw coal here, that's not a recipe for cleaning up the atmosphere or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So it makes you wonder, are these laws being pushed to save the planet, or are they being pushed to profit well-connected companies?
Yeah, and not in the U.S. It's an economic and environmental disaster. Tim Carney, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, meet a grammar Nazi, the holy war against cats, and Poland is the most boring country in the world. Just ask John Kerry. The topical storm is next. Hi, you. This is the topical storm where strange stories fall from the heavens like cupfuls of ambrosia and nectar. Open your mouth. You'll love it. Topic number one. You've heard of the soup Nazi and Illinois Nazis, but one Nazi is actually a grammar Nazi. The American Nazi Party has apparently grown tired of white bigots bastardizing the English language. So one Nazi-related Twitter account tweeted, quote, "It really isn't that difficult to use correct spelling and grammar."
Is that your Nazi accent?
Yeah, that's right. That's my Nazi accent. Shh.
It's Mr. Garrison.
Shh. Be professional and disciplined in everything that you do for the cause. Now, in all fairness, it's really hard getting into a good college when your only extracurricular high school activity was secretary of the teen Nazis. Even the dude's fellow Nazi friends said, geez, what a Nazi. Because they're mad because he was correcting their grammar. And they're like, it's Twitter, bro. Ease up.
I want to see what the Stalinists are going to come back with. Like, respond now. Yeah. Hold your red tongue.
Impeccable punctuation, that's what. And great mustaches. Topic number two. You know how exhausting travel can be, you know. But you and I both have the luxury of blowing off boring events when we travel and taking a nap at the hotel. Not so much for the Secretary of State. John Kerry was caught napping on the job. He was supposed to be listening to a translation of European leaders in Poland, but his jet lag got the best of him, and heavy eyelids fell harder and faster than the president's approval numbers. Take a look. Does that look like he's sleeping? Oh, hell yes!
Yeah, the adjustment is the tell.
The snapback.
Yeah. Oh, what? Yeah, right here. Very good. He got called out on his nappy nap by Mashable editor Brian Reese, who tweeted, Secretary of State at John Kerry taking a power nap in Warsaw. In his defense, long flight. Kerry replied, at Money Reese, just a really long blink. Oh, malarkey.
Like that.
John Kerry.
You don't have to respond to those.
One man's blink is another man's shut-eye. And like most things that come out of Kerry's mouth, he's full of pierogies. He was sleeping. Come on, man. Get some of that Warsaw meth and snap out of the funk, bro. What? Ugh.
What's great is that this came as part of the Obama administration announcing the European Reassurance Initiative. Totally going to reassure. Here's like $1 billion maybe of a couple of spare parts in the military. And meanwhile, the Secretary of State is napping. Good luck with Russia.
So long as they get their money, they'll forgive him.
They're like, we'll give you a pillow.
Actually, not get
And the
their money,
babushka.
get our money. But yeah.
Yakshamash. Topic number 3, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie failed to impress a local Tennessee Tea Party. So after his kind of failed speech, he headed to a local Nashville restaurant for a power meal. Perhaps he heard there was a free buffet in the other room. The corpulent governor, who's dropped 20% of his body weight recently. See, I say really nice things. He made a surprise appearance at a bachelorette party. And if you remember, about a week ago, Bill Murray made a surprise, poignant, and funny toast at a bachelor party. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when you compare apples to apple pie, Bill Murray is a far more impressive pre-wedding drive-by. And, by the way, he'd make a better president. Meatballs.
I don't think that Chris Christie's going to be getting a lot of Tennessee and Kentucky vote, just a hunch here.
Yeah. Yeah, not surprising that went sideways. I mean, there is a pretty thick strain of libertarianism in the Tea Party, and he has badmouthed libertarians on repeated occasions.
I don't think I'd be excited if Chris Christie came to my bachelorette party.
Either. Yeah,
no, that's not fun.
Unless he was wearing a fire hose and no shirt.
Yeah, although they didn't look angry in the photo, so there's
No,
that.
they're happy. But you know what happens at bachelor parties.
Yep.
Topic number 4, the Pope had a harsh... The Pope had a harsh message for cat ladies. Put the pussy down and go have some babies. The Pope specifically told a group of long-married couples that dogs and cats are no substitutes for children. He said if you have a long marriage with no children, you'll end up bitter and lonely, said the 80-year-old celibate. He then added, cats are weird and they smell awful, and if you have more than one as a single woman, you'll be a spinster for life. He said dogs are superior to cats.
I don't think
But children are superior to dogs.
Are you?
Unless it's a Vizsla. In that case, they're actually much preferred to children.
First of all, Vizslas are crazy animals. They are nervous. They're Hungarian. They're
Maybe that's why the Pope loves them, because he's non-judgmental.
Yeah, I don't want to hear you disagreeing with the Holy Father. I think he's right about. I think he's right about
give up your celibate dog-loving life.
I didn't say all
start
that.
Procreating.
I'm saying he's right about the dogs
wife.
being better than cats.
I think
if he said that, I think it's fine.
I think he said it. I'm pretty sure he did. Pretty sure that was the pontiff word.
The first
for
half,
word.
maybe it's a translation that's wrong. That might be.
That might be it.
Yeah.
Exactly, Camille. Thank you for that, Camille.
Yeah.
You're my
Happy to
friend
help.
tonight.
Yeah.
We
I
say
speak Latin.
One on my left. Dixie Dominus Domino Meo Sedia Dextris Meis. The war against domestic terrorism is on, just in time for an old crop of possible terrorists to head back to the Middle East. Thanks, Eric Holder. Plus, did the president break the law when he made the Gitmo shuffle? It's the Independents, and we're just getting warmed up. Stay with us. Welcome back. What happens when you're on the verge of closing the terrorist emporium known as Guantanamo Bay? To tell you the truth, you can't handle the truth, but the administration seems to think it's about time to fire up an abandoned law enforcement group to go after domestic terrorists. Lord knows there are plenty of known and unknown ways to target Americans thanks to a number of less than constitutional NSA programs. So now the FBI and Justice Department, to name but 2 agencies, will work together to thwart homegrown monsters. Is this poorly timed? Our panel is back, Lea and Tom. So let's get to it. Is this freaky, out of date? How does this land in the spectrum of law enforcement debacles and hits.
Almost every time that the FBI and our national crime-fighting apparatus goes after domestic terrorists, they end up targeting disfavored groups, most of whom have nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism, and it's a reason that we should have a red flag alarm at all.
Well, Lois Lerner is no longer at the IRS, so somebody has to go after them.
Yeah, I guess so. No, I mean, it's like they will read the Southern Poverty Law Center's latest missives and declare that the Oath Keepers, to name one group out of 1,000 examples, who are a group of people who've sworn an oath, they work in law enforcement and elsewhere, to uphold the Constitution and follow the Constitution instead of their orders if there's ever a conflict between the two. They have been listed in times before, even by this government, as a potential terrorist group. It's ridiculous. They are peaceful, peace-loving people who want to follow the Constitution.
The letter of the law.
The letter of the law. So, yeah, we should be worried about this, and we don't really have a domestic terrorism problem in this country. We just don't. And the fact that they're turning inward on us says something that they think that they can get away with it, which the Bush administration had a difficult time trying to pursue the exact same kind of
expansive programs to try and find terrorists. There are plenty of agencies that are supposed to be doing this work already.
Yeah.
The notion of creating a new panel or some new agency to do this, when it already apparently is the unstated policy of the last two administrations to put every single American under general suspicion, and they weren't able to stop the Boston terror plot. I mean, that is...
Which was not, I don't think you could call it domestic terrorism, although the president's advisors came out after that and said, well, it's Patriots Day in Massachusetts, so this is probably a homegrown problem.
They've got plenty to do already. You don't necessarily need new agencies or new panels to get that work done.
Well, one of the issues with 9/11 was that there wasn't enough coordination between the different intelligence agencies, and so I can see bringing, wanting to bring better coordination to how domestic terrorism is handled. Now, right now, the FBI has units that handles domestic terrorism, so there is some value to be gained from an intelligence perspective of coordinating those different agencies so that everyone's talking to each other. At the same time, though, this could just be another opportunity to have more bureaucrats throw more money at a problem, and bureaucracy doesn't tend to solve those problems.
Sounds that way to me. I mean, we've been hearing about this since September 11th, 2001. We're going to bring them together. We're going to share the information. Wasn't that what the Department of Homeland Security was going to do, was bring it all together? But then with the Boston bombers, they didn't communicate there. The FBI kept some information about the bomber, and so they're not sharing information. And no, we shouldn't create another thing. The last time this group was supposed to meet, I think, was September 11th. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. They were supposed to have a meeting that morning, and they said, okay, meeting's canceled. And then they, Bush went on with his Homeland Security apparati. And is that right?
Yeah,
I like it.
Sounds good. But, of course, this thing is ridiculous. But I think Holder and these guys, they do want to keep a watch on all different organizations like the Oath Keepers and maybe my barbershop quartet organization. We're like a subversive group.
There's your barbershop quartet, rather. Okay, well, Seattle is a beautiful city populated by well-intentioned idiots. Not all of you are idiots. You know I love Seattle, but there are some dum-dums there. The Emerald City do-gooders have crafted and passed local legislation making the minimum wage $15 an hour, which sounds like a great way to topple poverty, but it's not necessarily good for businesses to have a market-imposed blanket wage. What's the worst that could happen?
Everyone moves to the outskirts of town, and Seattle loses jobs.
Or they move to Vancouver, Washington, over the bridge quick as a wink. No income tax, no sales tax in Portland. It's the best way to go.
They at least don't move to that town that decided that it was a better idea to not just adopt a $15 minimum wage, to adopt it right away, immediately, and scare off people's jobs. People lost their 401ks, they lose their vacation time. All of those things could potentially happen. The real tricky problem here is that it's always difficult to attach those consequences to the specific policy, and folks don't seem to get the correlation yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is an opportunity to see a test case. I mean, they have voted for it. It's an opportunity to see a test case in this one location for what's kind of what's a national debate right now about potentially raising the national minimum wage. But, I will say this is certainly going to affect smaller businesses, the franchises more than the bigger businesses, the Walmarts, the Targets and those types of businesses. I can remember being in, restaurants where the owner of the restaurant was running the cash register, and he's counting every plastic fork that he hands out and every napkin because the profit margin is so small. So to say that this, that this isn't going to affect businesses, it certainly is.
And let the market decide. All right. Well, Tom and Leah, thank you guys so much. Maybe we'll see you on the after show. Very good.
So yeah, I'll be there.
Yes, you will. We've got more on Bergdahl in just a little bit. There are so many facets to this story. We're going to need to properly digest, and we will do that in a few. But next, what in the world is Operation Choke Point? I'll give you a hint. Eric Holder's involved, and it sucks. This is The Independent.
Whenever the sun don't shine, you throw out the lifeline.
Hey, it's The Independents, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, and the FDIC all walk into a bar. It sounds like a setup for a bad joke. But the reality is actually far worse and not funny at all. And a new and secret case of government overreach, Eric Holder is trying to get a bunch of government agencies to work with banks to smother businesses it finds objectionable. From porn and guns to Amway and Cutco, if the White House looks down on what you do, your bottom line could suffer. A new report from the House Oversight Committee shows how intimidation and banking peculiarities have been used to try and snuff entire industries. Let's talk about it with Brian Weiss, who's a senior advisor for the United States Consumer Coalition. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Welcome
Thank you
to The
for having
Independents.
me.
I'm so glad you're here because we want to hear all about Operation Choke Point. What exactly is it?
I wish I was here under better circumstances, but Operation Choke Point is it's this covert administration program that has finally found a way to get rid of all of the businesses and industries that the Obama administration doesn't like.
And what are an example of some of those industries?
Some of those industries include home-based charities, guns and ammunition sales, pharmaceutical sales. It includes, pornography, some of the ones that you had talked about, pornography and escort services, racist materials. There's about 24 different industries that have been listed on this presentation that wasn't supposed to be made public, but we uncovered it.
Wow.
And,
how did you get it?
Well, it was actually mistakenly posted on a public website. And so it was found, and it essentially lays out everything that the administration plans to do to get rid of these industries that so far they haven't been able to take out from a regulatory standpoint or legislatively. Including
some industries, some businesses like Amway and Cutco and, probably Mary Kay, what the administration considers pyramid schemes, but, people like being a part of it and some of them make money.
They call them pyramid type sales. Most people call them multi-level marketing, but you have Herbalife, you have, all of these Mary Kay, Amway, all of these businesses that are a lot of times single moms at home that are entrepreneurs trying to make a life for them and their families. And the fact is that none of the, I don't want to say none of these, most of these businesses and industries have done nothing wrong. But the administration, like I said, has found a way to intimidate banks in an illegal manner. Darrell Issa's report that came out last week specifically says that there's no legal jurisdiction or justification for this. So in an illegal manner, they found a way to destroy these businesses and industries.
Don't they have a First Amendment objection to this? You can't target someone for conducting a pattern of activity that is legal under the law. You fall into a category, and yet somehow you're suspect, even though that category, by definition, is legal.
Well, and that's what's interesting about this, because what they've done is they've put all of these industries into this category of high-risk merchants. So let me explain exactly how they do this. They send enforcement officers into banks and intimidate the banks into not doing business with all of these industries. So a team of 4 to 6 enforcement officers goes into a bank and says, we can't tell you not to do business with these industries, but if you do, we'll make sure to scrutinize every single transaction.
It's like the dispensaries in Colorado. The banks have been told specifically, do not, work with them, do not allow them to make any financial transactions, trying to put them out of business.
Well, the irony of this, actually, in Colorado, Eric Holder, the same week that he said that banks should not be doing business with all of these other industries that are completely legal, guns and ammunition sales and pharmaceutical sales, the exact same week, he actually issued a statement that says they could do business with marijuana dispensaries in Colorado. So it's sort of a which is it? And this is another example of the government picking and choosing winners and losers.
Yeah, and it's not right. And I'm glad you found the information. I'm really glad the House is looking into it because, frankly, it's un-American, Brian Weiss.
It is. This is the biggest, most significant threat to consumer choice and freedom that this country has ever seen. And this isn't the end of it. We need the American people to stand up. We have a whistleblower website for them to come out. Government employees, bank employees, and companies are coming out talking about how this is affecting them. So we ask everyone to go to usconsumers.org, share their stories with us so that we can stop this in its tracks.
All right, Brian, thanks so much. Very good. What's the worst part about the Bowe Bergdahl story? That he's a hippie deserter, his dad's questionable facial hair, or the president's curiously slippery actions that are putting the White House on the defensive? We'll get to that next. Stay with us. All right, was congressional approval required for that strange Taliban swap that brought home missing soldier Bowe Bergdahl? The president is getting awfully defensive about a story that's been percolating for the better part of 4 years. So why the urgency in Bergdahl's release? And did the president act above the law? Should he have informed Congress of the swap?
By law, he was supposed to. I believe we have some tape of Obama speaking today in Poland talking about this.
Regardless of the circumstances, whatever those circumstances may turn out to be, we still get an American soldier back if he's held in captivity. Period. Full stop. We don't condition that.
This is our constitutional scholar who was elected to restore balance to the runaway executive branch of the United States government. That's what it's really come down to, period, full stop. I'm going to disregard the statutory authority that the executive branch has to inform Congress 30 days notice instead of like 5 hours before or after the fact, like, oh, sorry, we're going to do this. This shows how far the president has come unmoored and his supporters have come unmoored for the very basis of his presidency to begin with, which is to roll back the Bush-Cheney expansion of executive power. This is egregious. And the fact that everybody, including the president's supporters like Jeffrey Toobin and the New Yorker, say, yeah, it's illegal, but the fact that people are shrugging at it shows what kind of poison partisan mindsets have.
Yeah.
You have a direct inversion relationship with executive power. The further away you are from holding it, very few people are consistent. We should treasure those who are and heap scorn on those who are not.
Well, it's the rule of law. I mean, and it's quite clear there shouldn't be a separate standard for the president when it comes to these things.
And by the way, where's the separation of powers in this?
There isn't any. It's the executive.
And if this were a Republican president, it would be, you know, an unholy poop storm. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody. So make sure you watch Fox News Channel tomorrow at noon. I will be co-hosting Outnumbered. This Friday, we're going to be doing a show called The War on Men. Help them if you got them. Go to our website. And now for After Hours, foxbusiness.com/The Independence. Lots to discuss. From Matt and Camille, I'm Kennedy.